First off, I'd like to say a little bit about the moderator for tonight's event. Justesen has lived and worked in the Bellingham community since 2001. She worked for a nonprofit organization as a legal advocate, supporting victims of domestic violence in criminal and civil court. She was drawn to From the Same Quiver because she completed the Camino de Santiago in 2017, causing her to fall in love with Spain. Her book club read and held a discussion group, which Kate attended, and everyone enjoyed greatly. And now our featured author, Kate Vredevoogd grew up under the looming conifers of the Pacific rainforest with her loving parents and her many animal friends. She started photography in Bellingham, Washington at 15 years old when she was given her very first film camera, and she started writing long before that, shortly after learning the alphabet. These two things are the glue that holds the pieces of her together. She was born in Washington State, but after catching the travel bug, she went on an epic road trip across the United States, which eventually led her to a flight to Spain, where she would spend the next portion of her life. She lived in Granada for 6 years and dedicated her time to perfecting her craft as a lifestyle and travel photographer and writing her first book, From the Same Quiver, which was published in December of 2019. She currently lives in Malaga, Spain, where she teaches English and creates Wanderlust Words blog and publications. They're here tonight to discuss this book, From the Same Quiver, a confessional tale of wanderlust, friendship, and the pursuit of self-identity. Please welcome Kate Vredevoogd and Justesen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lovely introduction.
All right. So, Kate, I'm really tickled that you invited me to moderate this with you. And maybe we perhaps want to start with a reading from the book.
Yeah, sure. That'll give me a chance to warm up my 3 a.m. voice. Get those vocal cords going.
Okay. And maybe are you going to give a little background on what this is about?
Yeah, I think I'll start with a little passage from New Orleans, the part with that creepy alleyway. And yeah, so New Orleans was a really cool place. We were there for a very short time, but it was powerful. There was just so much energy and just energy there, right? And New Orleans is a place of mysticism and fortune tellings and witchcraft kind of feeling, and I feel like we really experienced that in a couple of different places in a couple of different ways. This specific experience was kind of dark, pretty creepy, but it was definitely otherworldly. So yeah, so I'll start with that. Okay, so this is the day that we arrived in New Orleans. It's nighttime, and we were just walking around exploring the French Quarter, and there we go. Okay. So we zigzagged through the French Quarter and found ourselves on a dark back street with storefronts that said things like Palm Reader, Bring Your Past to Meet Your Future, and Alchemy Revolution. We stepped through the creaky door into one of the shops to find ourselves in a small, dimly lit room cluttered with amulets, deities, altars, and other magical objects. Against one wall was a large, dusty mirror on a dark wooden desk, which was covered with skulls of different sizes, candles, and incense. Directly in front of the mirror was a black pot full of small scraps of paper with messages people had written to their deceased loved ones, because this was an altar of the dead. There were also unsmoked cigarettes strewn about the desk, left as offerings. I gingerly picked up different objects from the shelves around the shop to inspect each one's secret. There was a basket of crystals, each with different purposes and properties, and we spent some time finding the crystal that most resonated with us at the moment. I left with a small white opal, which promised me creativity, energy, inner fire, and enthusiasm. We continued making our way down winding alleys, and I noticed that the streets were growing even darker, more sparsely populated, and that the energy around us was changing. Various clusters of 4 or 5 people whispering together hid in dark corners of the alleys, and other individuals walked by swiftly with a look of intent in their eyes. I felt as if I had taken a wrong turn and had found myself in Harry Potter's Nocturne Alley. In one corner, faintly illuminated by a small streetlight, were 5 figures, all dressed in black and huddled together so that none of their faces could be seen through the shadows. My gaze rested on them as I was overcome with suspicion and intrigue. Suddenly, one of the hooded figures flicked his head in a quick serpentine motion, and his eyes locked onto mine. I felt an instant chill come over my body, and my breathing was paralyzed. His eyes were solid black, with no pupils nor whites. Only a moment passed, but those black orbs penetrated my entire being with darkness and sent a rush of terror pulsing through my veins. As quickly as he had turned his head to look at me, he lizard flicked it back into the huddle, and his pale face disappeared into the shadows. I could hardly move, but I managed to glance at Miette and see an expression of terror on her face. Start walking as fast as you fucking can in any direction right now, I whispered to her. And we took off, not quite running so as not to draw too much attention to ourselves, but getting far away from the lizard man and his black orbs of death as quickly as possible. We walked and walked in horrified silence, and without stopping to look at street signs or our GPS. As if guided by intuition or some greater force, we found ourselves back on the familiar streets near our hostel 15 minutes later. Without consulting Miette, I directed my steps towards a small tavern, where I sat down at the bar and ordered a shot of whiskey. Me too, said Miette. I was surprised because whiskey was usually too strong for her taste. We're going to need to talk about what just happened. I twirled my empty shot glass on the bar top, but I didn't look up to make eye contact as I spoke. Kate, I have a yucky feeling inside. Yeah. Like really yucky. Yeah. Like I have the feeling of just having seen the devil. Yeah. It took us a couple more shots of Maker's Mark to really begin to shake off the sinister energy that had come over us. Eventually, we managed to laugh about it awkwardly, but we both knew that although the whole ordeal had passed in a fraction of a second, the image of those 2 glossy black eyes had been seared into our memories and would never completely fade away.
It's creepy.
It's so creepy.
It is so creepy. And, you know, the fact that you both witnessed it is like, gives it that, like, it really happened. It happened.
Oh yeah. Yeah. If she hadn't been there to corroborate.
Yeah, you might have later been questioning, but you both got the same feeling and you witnessed it. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I read that and I believed it. I was there, you know. I could
Oh, it
feel
was real. It was
I had
real.
the first time I read it, I had little hairs standing up on my arms. It was like, ooh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And the fact that we both, like, our immediate explanation was, no, this was the devil. That's what happened.
Yeah.
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 Not just some guy dressed up, or no, it was a very, very, very sinister energy that
Yeah,
you don't get from just like putting on a costume.
exactly. Exactly. Well, I want to ask you, you know, you guys took this journey, and when at what point did you decide, wow, this would make a good story?
You know, I was telling the story a lot in bars. You know, when you go to a new place and you're meeting new people and you go have a beer and you meet, you know, the other people in the bar, and then you start saying, oh, I'm from this place, I'm doing this, whatever. That was the story that I would tell because, you know, the first question is, where are you from? Why are you here?
Right.
I was like, well, do you have a minute? and telling the story again and again, you know, a shortened version, obviously. I realized that it was a pretty cool story.
Yeah. Yeah, because you experienced a lot on that trip, a lot.
I mean, it was life-changing for sure. Yeah.
And in thinking that it's a good story, how did you come to the conclusion, like, you could either write a novel or you could write a memoir? So, and, you know, deciding on a memoir is like a big leap.
Yeah. It wasn't a decision that I made. I mean, writing a novel wasn't even on my radar.
Okay.
It wasn't even at all, because I mean, for me, it's, you know, I've never really explored fiction writing so much. So just the structure of the novel, I read novels, but I identify more with being an essayist or an observer,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So that's what I had to do. And it wasn't until I was trying to find the right editor to work with me that I was even presented with the idea of marketing it or calling it a novel.
Oh,
And yeah, and there was one editor, she actually ended up being my designer. So she was great to work with, but I was at first going to hire her as an editor. But she told me, you know, I haven't had good experiences with publishing memoirs and calling them memoirs when you're not a
yeah,
famous person, because nobody cares.
yeah,
And, you know, I thought, well, I don't care if nobody cares. I care. Like,
yeah.
I'm not going to get rich with this book. The point is,
Yeah.
I just want to tell the story. So
Yes.
it was like an instant rejection of that idea.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And so this is a recollection with two people having an experience. How, when you decided that this actually would be public, did you talk to Miette about it?
Oh, I talked to her from
Well,
the
I
whole
mean,
thing.
I assume you did, yeah. But how did you present it to her?
I don't remember exactly how I presented it to her. Well, I'm sure I told her the idea first, like, I'm going to do
Okay.
this. And then I don't remember exactly, but she would be extremely supportive, you know, my cheerleader, like always.
Right.
But what I do remember though is after each installment, I would tell her, okay, you need to read this and give it the okay, not just in terms of like what I'm saying about her, because that's a whole thing,
Wow.
but
Yeah.
just, is it okay? I need your stamp of approval, right? And actually that was really fun. It was, you know, a year that I spent reliving this adventure with her, talking about every little detail and such.
Exactly. Yeah. I
Yeah.
can see that. Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to come back to that with you and Miette, but
Yeah.
so how, you know, I had written down some notes myself about, you know, you're a photographer and you're on this journey, and I'm guessing you used your camera. I mean, we know you used your camera, especially
Yeah.
from like the Santa Monica shot. Was it
Mhm.
Santa Monica? Yeah, I think so.
Pismo
Right?
Beach?
The fireworks.
Yeah.
But recollecting everything, did you take notes, or I mean, how did you pull it all back?
Yeah. Technology was key with that for sure. I didn't keep a journal. I'm not much on journaling events, like keeping a daily or a weekly journal.
Yeah.
I have notebooks everywhere that I write in when it comes.
Yeah.
So I didn't have any kind of log to go back to.
Okay.
What I did have was social media. So I went back to my Facebook and went, and I looked at all the posts that I had made, the date,
Okay.
where they were posted, and kind of pieced things together that way.
Yeah.
And then the pictures on my phone, I have
Yeah.
the phone from that trip. So I passed all the pictures to my computer and then went through all of those, and that helped jog my memory a lot.
Yeah.
And then Miette, I mean, we would just sit down before each scene, every scene, we'd sit down and say, okay, what happened?
Yeah.
What do you remember?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I can imagine that really was a wonderful help, because you have somebody that you guys trust each other implicitly, and you're, you know, reading about that friendship for me was wonderful to see that kind of synchronicity between two
Yeah.
people. It's beautiful. I have a childhood friend, so I know what that's like.
Yeah.
But she also would have been very helpful to fill in a blank here and there, or how do you recall that?
Definitely.
Yeah. So did you guys ever hesitate, or did you hold stuff back, or is this a full expose, or were there things that maybe Miette might have said, ooh, I don't know if I want that in there?
Yeah, I have a lot to say about that question. I mean, it was a big deal because obviously there are some decisions that I made in the making of the book, right, that I wouldn't make now, or I would make differently, knowing what I know now, right?
Okay.
But I didn't know these things then.
Yeah.
And then I was doing the best that I could, just like we all are. So what's the point? You know, I definitely wasn't interested in, you know, gratuitous like sex scenes or anything like that. But the things that felt important to me in the growth, I mean, the story is about growth and discovery, right?
Yeah.
So the things that felt like a real part of that process, I decided I'm just going to include them because they're important to the story. And it would be doing a disservice to the story to keep things out because I'm afraid And I think also at the time I had just recently discovered the work of Brene Brown. I don't know if you're familiar with her. She's an incredible storyteller, investigator.
All-time favorite of mine.
Yeah,
I
oh my
love
God, she's
her. Yes,
amazing.
I love her. I've read every
Yeah.
one of her books.
Yeah, she's a rock star. So for people who don't know, she works, or she investigates vulnerability and shame. And so I was kind of learning about her work then, and I made this decision, like, this is a chance for me to be vulnerable, and be seen. And what do we want more in life than to be seen and to be loved, right?
Yes.
Not despite our flaws, but because of our flaws.
Yes.
I was like, hey, I'm just going to be vulnerable, and then people can see me and love me if they want to, and if they don't want to, then that's okay.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. That's why, I was driving, listening to NPR, my favorite show, my favorite radio station, and Terry Gross was interviewing someone, an author, can't even remember who, and I can't exactly remember what she said, but it was something like, isn't that, and he had written something more of a memoir-like thing. It wasn't a novel, it was a story more about himself. And she said, isn't that what makes a great writer? Being able to go deep and showing vulnerability. And I immediately thought of you and this story, because I thought that's exactly what you did. You went deep, throughout the book, and you allowed yourself to be vulnerable. And you're right, it is a story of growth. And the part where the Vegas part, you're unabashedly showing us that. And we were, I was young once. I remember what that was like. And I love it. I just love it. And thank you for being so, unencumbered, unencumbered.
Well, I mean, it wasn't easy, but in order to be vulnerable, there has to be some level of uncertainty or emotional insecurity, right? Otherwise, you're not being brave.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And I would actually argue that not just to be a good writer, but to be a good human, you have to be willing to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
That's how you make authentic connections with people. So.
Yeah. But, I would say it's probably one of the most difficult things we do, or, Brene Brown wouldn't be in business, because she's definitely pushing that, be vulnerable. But I mean, you have a leg up already. So kudos, my friend, kudos. So I had one question. Was Seoul part of in this discussion, because he does come into the story a bit?
Yeah. So that's something that I really had to keep in mind too, because I mean, the Saul that is Saul is a different Saul than the one that is in this book. I didn't know this one. I've never met him, and I don't want to. And he doesn't exist anymore, right? And when I was writing the book, he already didn't exist anymore.
Yes.
So, and I really wanted to be respectful of that.
Yeah.
And not, I mean, he's not the bad guy. There's no bad guys here. He's a very good guy, right? But I mean, that push and pull that was going on between him and Miette was another very important part of the storyline here. So he wasn't directly in conversation with me, but through Miette. I mean, I made sure that everything that was written was okay by her, and thus okay by him.
Yeah.
I don't think he's read it, and that's fine.
Oh, he hasn't read the book?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Okay. Oh, that's kind of interesting.
I mean, he might not want to.
He might not want to, and but I think that's what speaks to me in your story, is how, when you said, the soul today is not the person in the book. And I think that's what I love about this book, that the allowance that we are on a path of growing all the time. And so, we are allowed to show ourselves, because a year from now, it's going to be different, you know, and I
Mhm.
might be stronger and I might be this or I might be that, but I may not be the person that was angry a year, you know. What I'm
Yeah.
saying. Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
So it's very beautiful. I just love it.